Back in 2020, before I started releasing solo challenge videos on this channel, I was watching a ton of Madrybread and JRose11. Their videos were fantastic for me to put on in the background while I worked on my master's thesis, which was a task that I was definitely procrastinating on. The more and more of their videos I watched, the more I felt the pull towards trying my own solo challenge, with my favorite Pokemon at the time, Butterfree. Turns out all of this synergized really nicely because I was doing a music degree and I wanted to learn video editing to make music videos after I graduated. So, with the express intent of learning video editing, I decided that I might as well just copy their general style of videos and play my own solo challenges. I didn't expect or think that anyone would ever watch my content. That said, here I am 4 years later, this is now my career, and I have a small team supporting me. I always thought it went without saying, but I am truly grateful for the fact that Madrybread and JRose made content. If they hadn't, I wouldn't be here, and that would be sad, because I'm really enjoying this massive project that I've put myself in, trying to complete every main series game with every species and make a video based on those challenges. I think it's quite possible that I will never complete this challenge, and that's a part of it that really inspires me. I like to shoot for the impossible. Now that I do feel I have my own direction, style, and visuals, I have really wanted to give back in whatever ways that I could to the people that got me started. So that brings me to the point of today's video. About a year ago on Twitter, I noticed that Madrybread was posting about how he was sad he couldn't play Sandile in earlier generations. After all, it was introduced in Generation 5. As you all know if you frequently watch my content, I do a lot of backports, moving species from future games back into Generation 1, 2, and now 3. I figured I could take 1 or 2 hours on a weekend, put together a Sandile patch, and send it Madrybread's way. Maybe that's a way of me giving back. He can now make a video for this Pokemon on his channel. Okay, so now let's talk about how I backported Sandile and what I'm going to do with this run. Actually, no, let's not do that. That's not how any of this went down. I sent him the patch, we chatted a little bit, and then nothing happened for about a year until I saw this tweet. Or maybe it's an X, no one knows anymore. Seeing it, I had made a lot of developments with my process in backporting Pokemon, so I decided to quickly whip up a new patch. I put that together and then made this post. So today is going to be Sandile Day. I'll be releasing this video here on my channel, and Madrybread will be releasing his own solo playthrough with Sandile in Pokemon Yellow. Our approaches to the game and making content are vastly different, so I think it's a nice chance for us to compare, contrast, and for us to all appreciate the fact that there are different people doing different things within this niche. So if you like Sandile, today is the day. And that made me curious because Sandile's not a Pokemon I typically think of when I think of Generation 5. So, Madrybread, why did you decide to pick Sandile for today's challenge?
Basically, I did a Gen 5 run of Sandile, and I had a really fun time with it. I just thought it was a super fun Pokemon to do a solo challenge with. I was lamenting in the video that there weren't really any other generations for me to do that with. I haven't done generations after Gen 5 yet, so I didn't really have many games to do that with. And I was saying, man, I wish that Sandile was in, like, the previous generations. And then people started hitting me up and saying that they could put it in that generation. And then Scott hit me up and said he could put it in the generation, and I started having artists who were drawing like art of it in the earlier games. It's really cool. So that's why I wanted to do that.
I'm glad you picked this thing because for me, this is going to be the first dark type backport I do in Pokemon Yellow, so it's a chance for me to try this type out in the game where psychic types are honestly overpowered. So for some context, I have backported the dark type into the game, but I have not changed moves like Bite to be the dark type. That's because then wild Pokemon or enemy Pokemon would then have access to dark type moves against me. And I didn't want to change the fundamental Yellow experience, especially since I'm going to rank Sandile alongside all of the other Pokemon in my tier list. So I need to make sure that the enemy Pokemon remain unchanged. In addition to this means I won't be backporting the Steel type and placing it on Magneton. That thing's going to stay a mono-electric type. And that's going to be a little bit relevant today, but Magneton can't really do much to Sandile. For base stats, Sandile was easy to backport into Generation 1. It has 50 HP, 72 attack, 35 defense, special attack, and special defense, and 65 speed. So of course its special in Generation 1 is going to be 35, and because base speed determines critical hits, it's going to have a 12.5% chance to score 1 on any turn. To create a Generation 1 level up learn set, I always look at the debut generation and try and base my choices on that. It's because it's the earliest time the Pokemon appeared in the series, and I think that this would be the most analogous with how the Pokemon would be in Generation 1. In Generation 5, it starts with Leer, Rage, and Bite, then learns Sand Attack, Torment, Sand Tomb, Assurance, Mud Slap, Embargo, Swagger, Crunch, Dig. Okay, Dig, there's at least a Generation 1 move. Outside of its starting set, there aren't very many. Later on, it gets Earthquake and Thrash, so I had to do my best with this set. I decided to start with Leer and Rage, then give Bite at level 10, Sand Attack at level 16, kind of replacing both Sand Attack at level 7 and Mud Slap at level 19, Dig at level 22. This is a substitute for Embargo, Swagger, and Crunch. I needed something to fill the level 20 level up moves. I gave it String Shot in the place of Scary Face as a speed lowering move, Earthquake at level 34, and Thrash at level 37. If you're wondering why its level up learn set is only 6 moves, it's because in Generation 1, Pokemon tend to not have nearly as many level up moves. Also, in these games, it's quite rare for first stage Pokemon to start with more than 1 or 2 moves. If you want 3 or 4 moves, you have to be a mid-stage evolution or a final evolution. Through TM and HM, I decided to give it all the ground type moves, Counter because this is the breeding move that it gets in Generation 5, and Rock Slide because it learns this by TM in Generation 5. The one big choice that I made for Sandile here is to give it the TM for Swords Dance, which is a replacement for Hone Claws, which you can learn in Generation 5. I assume this is going to make it pretty broken in Generation 1. Well, as soon as I get to Sylph. Before that, I have to start with Leer and Rage, quite frankly an awful starting set. It is so bad that I cannot defeat the rival's Eevee in the lab, so I take a loss here, and because of that he is going to evolve his starter into Vaporeon. This has a small advantage packaged with it. While I don't get the experience from this fight, I can now defeat the rival on Route 22, and it won't change the team he picks. There is a misconception in the community sometimes that if you lose in the lab and win on Route 22, that then he'll pick Flareon, but that isn't the case. Every time you lose in the lab, he always picks Vaporeon. On the first route of the game, I battle wild Pokemon, which are actually a little bit threatening for Sandile. This thing is quite weak. Then inside the forest, I battle the first bug catcher. He's pretty easy to defeat because he stacks up my rage counter using Tackle. Every time the enemy triggers it, it raises my attack stat, which will cause the badge boost to trigger later into the game. But since I don't have any badges, this effect isn't playing out right now. I defeat the second bug catcher, although this battle takes much longer because I don't get to stack up rage counters on the Metapod that starts the fight. This brings Sandile up to level 10, and I should mention its growth rate, which is medium slow. This means it levels up extremely quickly in the early game. Before level 30, this is by far the best growth rate to have in a solo challenge. So now that I have Bite, I can fight the Lass in the forest as well for additional experience. While I do that, I want to give a shout out to Izzy Ray, who did the front sprite for Sandile, and I based my Generation 1 back sprite off of her back sprite from Generation 2. When I initially suggested using her art for this backport to Madrybred, he mentioned that she had made a sprite for him for like the player character in the overworld, as well as front and back in-battle sprites for him as a trainer class. I actually commissioned one of these for myself, but I have not used it yet. And there's another project I have in mind that I once again might require her services for. But this is way too premature to talk about that. Anyways, I'll mention it later in the year. For now, my Sandile is level 11, and I want to head back to Viridian City so that I can go to Route 22 to battle the rival for additional experience. It tends to be the case that this battle's a little bit tricky if you go in under level 9 or 10. His Spearow is quite good at level 9 with the same type attack bonus move Peck. However, with Bite and a decent attack stat, I am able to defeat him with no issues. The reason I wanted the extra experience is I'm not really sure how Sandile is going to beat Brock. If Bite was a dark type move, it would deal special damage, and in that case I'd be able to get by him quite fast. But with it being a normal move, which is physical, I am not going to have a good option against his rock types. Since Sandile's a medium slow growth rate Pokemon, I figured defeating all of the trainers in the early game and leveling up to like maybe 16 for Sand Attack would be the safest play. But by the time I clear the forest, I'm only level 14. In the Pewter City Gym, I battle the junior trainer. This brings my Sandile almost up to level 15, but not quite there. So, do I fight Brock without Sand Attack? I have Leer, I guess? Maybe that can combo well together with Bite and give me a win if I get lucky. I decided to go for it, so let's see if Sandile can pull this off. Geodude is first. In Pokemon Yellow, it's level 10 and only has the move Tackle, meaning it's going to attack Sandile every turn. Each one of these hits is doing 5 damage, and I have a total of 43 HP. I didn't want to take too long setting up with Leer, plus Bite has a decent effective power even though it's resisted. 30 is more than manageable, and it does have a chance to flinch, although in Generation 1 it's only 10%. After lowering Geodude's defense 3 stages, I start to use Bite, which is doing about a third each hit, so it takes 3 turns to knock out Brock's lead. I'm left with under half health, but luckily for me I level up to 15, gaining back a little bit more before the Onix comes in. With my current speed stat, I'm always going to move first, and Onix can do no damage every turn, missing with moves like Tackle and Bind, or using status moves like Screech and Bide. And yes, Bide is a status move in this case. I'm never going to attack into it, instead prioritizing Leer to lower Onix's defense. The thing I'm most worried for is Screech followed by Bind, which will hit multiple times, and that's exactly what happens right out of the gate. The Onix lowers my defense by 2 stages, then hits with Bind, doing 4 damage per hit. It lasts a total of 3 hits, bringing Sandile down to 8 hit points. So it looks like I'm probably going to have to level up to 16 and get Sand Attack. One way I could get that move a little bit faster is by blackout training against Brock's Geodude. I often do not do this because it takes so long to finish the Geodude off using normal type moves, but in this case with Leer, it didn't take very long at all, only 6 turns. Here's the thing though, I lower the Onix's defense all the way to -6. Onix is using Bide, so it gave me some time there. Then my Bite does about a third. Onix uses Screech again, taking my defense to -6. I go for Bite, take it down to orange health. It misses Bind, and Sandile pulls through with a win. Okay, this was not what I expected. I really thought I was going to lose to Brock, but apparently we're just progressing with the playthrough. In my follow-up attempts, I am definitely going to play this more conservatively, utilizing Sand Attack instead. The fact that Sandile is over-leveled and has access to Bite makes Route 3 extremely quick to get through. I fight the Bug Catcher with 4 Pokemon for additional experience, and then make my way into Mount Moon. Here I start to battle optional trainers, first the Super Nerd, because I need to start leveling up so that I'm going to be able to beat Misty. Sandile won't have an issue outspeeding the Staryu, which has 38 speed, but the Starmie's 56 is going to be a tall task to move first against, and Bubble Beam will hit like a truck. That said, I didn't want to over-battle trainers in this section of the game. Nugget Bridge has the highest density of mandatory trainers, shout out to Gym Leader Matt, and they should level Sandile up enough that I could either face Misty or go to the SSN and continue my training. So today I only battle 2 additional trainers in Mount Moon before the mandatory Super Nerd, then face Jesse and James. Even without Dig, the poison types here are not a threat. Sandile makes it through them, and I head to Cerulean City. I conveniently have 39 speed, which would help against Misty's Staryu, but obviously fighting her now doesn't make any sense. I don't even have Dig yet. So we're gonna face the rival next. Without Dig here, I'm gonna 2-shot or 3-shot the Sandshrew, giving it time to use Sand Attack. Always annoying when this happens. I 2-shot the Spearow, luckily not getting hit by Growl along the way. Then Sandshrew comes in. I do not have the damage to do more than half. As a result, it gets 2 turns to attack. Choosing Scratch both times. Perfect. Rattata's next, I flinch it with Bite. Perfect. Then Eevee comes in. This one does get a Sand Attack off. That's annoying. It's also doing decent damage with Tackle, but I hit a Bite anyways, get a critical hit, and the rival's ace faints. Against the first Lass on Nugget Bridge, when I knock out her Pidgey, Sandile levels up to 22, where it learns Dig. In Generation 1, this move has 100 base power, so with the same type attack bonus, and super effective damage against the following Nidoran female, it has an effective power of 300. This move is really broken in this section of the game. There are a lot of poison types, although these Zubats are particularly pesky, because while they're a poison type, they also have the flying type, so I have to revert back to Bite to defeat them. In order to gain as much speed stat experience as possible, I fight this hiker who has an Onix. If you didn't know, Onix has basically no other stats, it's exclusively speed. At the end of the route, there's the Oddish Lass. Luckily, Dig one-shots both of them. Okay, so I'm going to try and fight Misty now, because I don't want to backtrack from Vermilion City. Then I would have to backtrack to Vermilion City to face Surge. It's quite inefficient when you have to do things this way, and while I'm not going to move first against the Starmie, maybe it's possible now that my Sandile is level 25 and I have access to Dig. After all, I did luck through Brock, so maybe Sandile can pull it off for the second time in a row. Misty's Staryu goes down to a single hit from Dig. Lucky she did not use her X-Defend, but she still has one for the Starmie. However, it attacks right away with Water Gun. This does more than half to Sandile, which is really not good. My Dig almost knocks the Starfish out, then it chooses Bubble Beam, and I get my first reset. Okay, what happens if the Starmie goes for Bubble Beam right away? Well, Sandile has enough health to survive. If I get a critical hit, I will win, but I don't. Starmie survives, and now Misty would have to use her X defend, which she can, although she chooses Water Gun and I get a second reset. Another potential path to victory here is using Sand Attack on the Starmie, messing up its accuracy, having it miss once, and then using Dig to knock it out. I went for this strategy. In the end, it doesn't work out. She just hits another Bubble Beam and I get my third reset. Okay, this is a first playthrough. I don't need to squeeze through Misty now. Instead, let's just go to Vermilion City and make this more consistent. On my way, I faced Sandy, and I realized that Sandile is often found in desert areas where there are sandstorms. Shouldn't it be immune to moves like Sand Attack? That seems like it would be the most flavorful thing to do, but of course they never implemented something like this. When I said that, I second-guessed this a little bit and went and did some research. While doing this, I found out that Sandile has the ability Moxie, which is fantastic for a solo challenge. When a Pokemon with this ability causes direct damage that feints the enemy Pokemon, then its attack stat is raised by 1 stage. In my backport series, I have made the decision not to backport abilities. It's a little bit complex, but moreover, it's just not a mechanic that was available in Generation 1, and it doesn't feel right. Unless the Pokemon absolutely requires that ability, I'm thinking about Pokemon like Slacking or Shedinja. For them, I will be backporting their abilities. On the SSN, I pick up the Rest TM to be safe. Then I grab the Body Slam TM, fight the Gentleman, grabbing myself an additional rare candy, and then I teach Body Slam in the place of Leer. Okay, Rival 3, and this one's easy because my moveset is fantastic by this point. Body Slam 1 hits both the Spearow and the Rattata. Dig takes care of the Sandshrew in a single hit, as well as the Eevee. With him defeated, I am almost level 28, and my speed stat is still not enough to move first against Misty's Starmie. To level up to 28, I fight one Gentleman on the SSN who has 2 Growlithe. By the way, once Sandile levels up, it has the chance to learn String Shot, which I pass up, even though it could have solved the Starmie speed problem. Unless I'm pairing it with Sand Attack, I don't think I'm going to survive Misty unless she uses 2 Water Guns and gets low damage rolls with them. Or maybe leveling up has given Sandile enough special to survive. However, if the Starmie goes for Bubble Beam in combination with Water Gun, I'm definitely going to faint. Okay, here's how level 28 goes against the Starmie. Instead of her attacking, she chooses X defend, minimizing the damage from Dig, which maybe could have one hit at this level. Then Starmie goes for Water Gun. It does do less than half at this level. I follow up with another Dig, and Starmie goes down. Okay, time for Surge, the worst gym leader in this game, and maybe in any Pokemon game. His yellow incarnation is particularly bad with only a single Pokemon. He doesn't have good AI, so he could use Thunderbolt against Sandile. In this case, he just chooses an X speed. Even though the Raichu was already faster, I use Dig and One Shot. This win gives me level 29, which is the level Sandile evolves at. Now, I did not backport its evolutions, so I just set it to evolve into Electrode, I think. This is so I have to cancel the evolution animation, because all other first stage Pokemon of the original 151 do have to do this, and that is included in their times. Many people have told me I should mod this out, but I won't be doing that because it is how the game is. If you want to play with a first stage Pokemon, you do have to cancel the animation, so I'm leaving it in to stay true to the spirit of the game. What this means is that a Pokemon that has to level up more as a first stage Pokemon has a bigger disadvantage than a Pokemon that has to level up more as a final stage Pokemon. And I think this quirk should be preserved in the results that we get. It also gives first stage Pokemon like, say, Pumpkaboo for example, that evolves through trade, a key advantage. They don't see this animation every time they level up. Okay, the next trainer is the Rapping Lass. She is usually terrifying, but luckily Body Slam and Dig are more than enough to manage all of her grass types. I didn't even need to use Dig against the Oddish, Body Slam just has enough damage. The Pokemaniac inside the tunnel, his Cubone takes a while to knock out, as well as the Slowpoke. Luckily this thing doesn't have any water type moves, so it's not a problem for Sandile. I started the fight with the Status Condition Junior Trainer at less than ideal health. Still though, Dig is just fantastic against these grass types, so she's not an issue. And it continues being fantastic against the self-destructing Hiker. One thing I love here is that if you use Dig, sometimes his Pokemon will self-destruct while you're underground, and you'll only use a single PP to knock out 2 of his Pokemon. It doesn't happen here, but it's still a series of 3 one-hits. The Rocket Hideout is my first destination once arriving in Celadon City. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. I want the PP up for Earthquake, and I also want the rare candy to ensure that I'm at a high enough level at the end of the game. In the department store I buy Carbos. I want to ensure that Sandile is not moving second against key foes. I also picked up the TM for Rock Slide, which gives me fantastic coverage against flying type Pokemon. I teach it in the place of Sand Attack, and now I can use it against the rival Spearow in Pokemon Tower. It one-shots. From there, I will mention that his team is a little bit different than it normally is on this channel. He has a Vulpix second instead of his Magnemite, and he does not have a Shelder. This is because his final team is going to be the Vaporeon team, which I very rarely face. That's just because it's fairly uncommon for a Pokemon to lose the fight in the lab. I guess I'm to blame for this, because I gave Sandile Rage to start with, which is just not a good move. Well, in Generation 1. In Generation 2, it's fantastic. fantastic in the early game. You know, I'm Canadian, so I should probably apologize. Madrybred, I am so sorry that I made you suffer through the early game with only Rage and Leer. That also reminds me of this question that Madrybred answered on Twitter. It says,
well, J-Rose, Scott's Thoughts, and myself are actually all the same person. Think about it. Have you ever seen us in the same place at the same time?
Maybe I'll go one step further. It's like we're one Pokemon using Double Team multiple times so that we appear like we're in different geographical locations. Okay, Pokemon Tower, really easy. All of the Ghastlies are one hit by Dig. Jesse and James are also going to be easy with one hits from Dig. Note here, I move Bite into the top slot of my moveset, then I use Dig. The reason is I'm noticing that I'm about to level up to 34. When this happens, I can learn the move Earthquake, and spamming A replaces Bite in my top slot, so that now Earthquake is in my top slot, and of course this is going to be my go-to move throughout the next section of the game. Especially because Cycling Road is next, and there are so many fantastic poison types to knock out here for experience. This is one of my go-to locations for training in these solo challenges. The first biker I take on has 2 Wheezing and 1 Coughing. He is great for experience, especially when you can one-hit, which Earthquake can. After grabbing a rare candy in the grass, I head south and fight the last biker on the route who has 5 Pokemon. Again, fantastic experience yields. I think I mentioned this guy in every video because he is just so good to fight, especially when I don't have to use Dig to one-shot his Pokemon. This fight felt like a breeze, and it brings Sandile up to level 36. This does help me avoid wild Pokemon in the Safari Zone, although some can still show up. It only blocks Pokemon that are under your current level, so all of the level 36 Mons can still appear. I end up running into 2. Slight nuisance. Anyways, let's head back to Celadon City. I made the choice next to fight Erica, and I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I'm only level 36. I think I was overconfident with Earthquake against the grass poison types, but this is just not a good idea because her first Pokemon is Tangela. My best move against it is Body Slam, and with it I do about a quarter. Then it goes for Mega Drain, dealing half to Sandile, which fully heals the Tangela. So unless I get really lucky with Paralysis, this is not going to work. And I do get really lucky with Paralysis. Tangela misses 2 attacks, and Sandile finishes it. Is it possible that I win this? It actually might be. After saying no to Thrash, her Weepinbell comes in, I go for Earthquake, it does enough damage, and I move on to the Gloom. Okay, if I win here, I did not deserve it. I use Earthquake, and Gloom survives with orange health, uses Petal Dance, and Sandile faints. Okay, time to leave the gym. I'm gonna go to Saffron City so that I can explore Sylph. Here's a great trainer to face in here. On the floor just above the one where you grab the card key, you can battle this scientist who has 5 Pokemon. They're poison and electric types, so with a ground type move, I can one-shot all of them and get fantastic experience. I fight a bunch of other trainers, but I'm not gonna go through them in detail because the main reason I'm here is to pick up the TM for Swords Dance. In my opinion, this is the second best move in all of Generation 1. I have Sandile learn it right away in the place of Body Slam because rock moves and ground moves together have neutral coverage against all targets that I'm going to face for the rest of the game. So will Sandile be able to defeat the rival and his Vaporeon? Let's see. Against the Sandslash, I didn't want to set up too much because it can use Sand Attack to lower my accuracy. Plus when it uses Slash, it deals ridiculous damage, bringing Sandile down to 16 hit points with a crit. So I hope +4 is going to be enough. Sandslash and Magneton both aren't threats, but Ninetales has Quick Attack. Luckily it goes down without choosing it. And that leads us to the Kadabra, which cannot do anything to me. Both Confusion and Psybeam have no effect, Disable is terrible, and Recover is obviously not helpful. It falls to a single Earthquake, leading to the Vaporeon. Now, it is really bulky. Also, when I get critical hits, I will do less damage because they bypass my stat changes, including my badge boosts and all stage modifiers. In this case, I crit the Vaporeon, failing to get the knockout. It uses Aurora Beam and Sandile goes down. This next fight is almost an exact copy of what happened in the previous one. Sandslash attacks twice and Sandile goes down to exactly 16 hit points again. What are the chances of that? Anyway, with +4, if I don't crit the Vaporeon, I'm going to win. But I also need to dodge Ninetales attacks. I said Quick Attack previously because I'm used to moving first against all of the rivals Pokemon except the Kadabra when I have 83 speed. But in this case, the Ninetales is actually tied with the Kadabra for 84 speed. But none of this matters because like I said, the Ninetales is terrible. It just chooses Roar. Okay, Vaporeon time. Can Earthquake do it? And the answer is, without a critical hit, yes. I love it when I can avoid backtracking with Swords Dance users. Coming to Sylph only once does save time, and it just feels so much smoother. And Sandile also has another advantage here as a Dark type, because I can just go and face Sabrina right away. Okay, so let's talk about what she can actually do against me, because remember, Psychic-type moves don't do any damage to Dark-type Pokemon. While the Abra can lower my accuracy, the Kadabra can also lower my accuracy, but it can damage me with Psywave because this move is a fixed damage dealing move in Generation 1, and it bypasses type calculations. This is a strange scenario. Of everything that she can do to me, the thing I'm most scared for is Psywave. What a weird world Sandile lives in. Anyway, she doesn't have good AI, she has no way of knowing that she should be choosing Psywave, so she randomly chooses between her moves, giving me time to set up with Swords Dance. Kadabra does land one Psywave, doing a lot of damage before I knock it out. Last is Alakazam. Despite my accuracy being lowered, I just hit Earthquake and it goes down after failing Recover. Koga is next, and I want to quickly go through his team, so I'm going to bring it up on the right hand side of the screen. Look at his first and third Venonats. They both have Sleep Powder, and as a grass type move, his AI is going to prioritize it against Sandile. So if I don't one-shot both of them, I'm going to get put to sleep and likely chipped away at. However, I'm not going to take any damage from Psychic, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Although this problem is solved for me during the gym, I decide to battle the two optional Tamers for additional experience. And the second one Sandslash lowers my accuracy, I miss the Arbok, and it uses Poison Sting, inflicting that status on Sandile, so I can just take it into the battle with me against Koga and never get hit by Sleep Powder. This means I can set up against the first Venonat for free. Toxic, Sleep Powder, and Psychic can't do anything, so its only move is Tackle, or Koga could use an X attack. I go all the way to +4, this should be more than enough, and then I use Rock Slide against his bug types. This is a mistake. Earthquake has the exact same effective power, so I should be using it instead for more reliable accuracy. Luckily for me, it doesn't miss. I still don't figure it out by the time the fighting bug type Venomoth comes in. It goes for Leech Life, which is its best damage dealing move, however it doesn't deal nearly enough, and with that I take out Koga's ace. The Soul Badge gives Sandile a much needed boost to its speed stat. Now after this battle against Koga, I go over to the Warden's house and try and move the boulder. I have not beat Erica yet, so I can't do that. I'll have to remember to backtrack here later. Next I go to Cinnabar Island, battling Psyche along the way for additional experience. Although I'm not going to stay here very long, once I'm finished with Pokemon Mansion, I go back and face Erica so I don't forget her. At this level things are very simple. Swords Dance on the Tangela. Even if it uses Mega Drain and does a lot of damage, it's okay. Then I can use Rock Slide to knock it out. Remember, I don't have Body Slam available anymore. Surprisingly, the Tangela does survive a single hit, but then it goes down. After that it's simple. Earthquake the Weeping Bell and the Gloom, and earn myself the Rainbow Badge. With her out of the way, it is now time to progress through Blaine's gym to take on the Fire-type Specialist. My current speed stat means I'll move first against the Ninetales, but not against the Rapidash or the Arcanine. The ground typing does not resist fire-type moves, so I'm going to take neutral damage from all of Blaine's moves, and with Sandile's defensive stats, I am a little bit worried about this battle. Okay, here we go. Ninetales is first. I'm going to go for Swords Dance against it to set up. It just chooses Tail Whip, badge boosting me further, which is perfect. Now I'm going to outspeed all of Blaine's Pokemon. Earthquake one-shots the Ninetales, even with a critical hit. Next is Rapidash. It also falls to a single hit, but the one that has the most chance of surviving is the Arcanine. But even it doesn't have what it takes to stand up to Sandile. This win completes my badge boosts, and I also remembered to go back to the Warden's house to collect the rare candy. I'm really proud of myself. I usually forget this candy after attempting to pick it up without beating Erica. Okay, Giovanni's coming up next. Fighting the trainers inside his gym brings me up to level 49, but my speed stat is only 115. While this is enough for the Nidos and the Rhydon, it's not enough for the Dugtrio and the Persian. I could use rare candies here, but that might be slightly premature. I would rather level up at lower levels if I can, so let's try Giovanni at this level and hope for a miracle with Swords Dance. Dugtrio is the first threat. Dig and Earthquake will both do decent damage, they can also crit. Then Fissure will one-hit KO because I'm slower, and it can also use Sand Attack, which is what it goes for. So this is not a great start to the fight, but after one Swords Dance I am faster than the Dugtrio because of badge boosts. Sand Attack did raise my speed. As a result, I'm going to start my sweep here with +2. I hit the Dugtrio, knocking it out. Persian is next, I miss here, tanking a Screech. My defense is 37 now, which is absolutely terrible. If I get hit by the Rhydon, I am definitely going to lose. Nidoqueen is next, Earthquake one-shots. Nidoking I have to use Dig against because I've run out of Earthquake PP. Unfortunately I miss, and that allows us to see that it's going to use Double Kick, which is super effective. It does way too much damage, and with 2 hits, Sandile faints. Okay, if the Dugtrio doesn't use Sand Attack, I'm gonna have a better chance at this. In the next battle, I only set up one Swords Dance. Without the badge boost from Sand Attack, I'm not faster than the Dugtrio or the Persian, but Giovanni uses a guard spec because he's sponsored by this item's company. Then the Persian comes in, he uses Fury Swipes, which does not knock me out, and I take it down. Okay, this is looking better. Nidoqueen falls to a single Earthquake, so does the Nidoking, and now I need to hope I have enough damage for the Rhydon. I honestly didn't think it was going to be possible, but Sandile pulls through with the win. Time for the rival on Route 22. This one is straightforward. The Sandslash here is not very good unless it uses the move Slash, which does brutal damage to Sandile. I don't think at the beginning of this challenge I recognized the downside of having such low physical defense. In Generation 1, the primary problem is usually just having too low of a speed stat, at least in yellow version. In red and blue, the speed thresholds are much more forgiving for the player. I'm gonna have to attack here unless I want to chance it on the Sandslash, but I didn't, so I use Earthquake, knocking it out. I was hoping for a one-hit on the Execute with Rock Slide to dodge Stun Spore, but it just chooses Solar Beam after surviving one hit. Then the Magneton is a one-hit, but on the Ninetales, I choose to set up one turn with Swords Dance because it can go for something like Roar. And it does, so I squeeze in one more Swords Dance before knocking it out. With badge boosts, I am faster than the Kadabra, and the Vaporeon is not going to survive provided I don't get a critical hit. Sandile doesn't, so with that, I am headed towards Victory Road. Here I decided to do some optional training. I wanted to fight this cool trainer because he has 4 Pokemon, but I was not prepared for this. My health is still low from the rival battle, so yeah, the Ivysaur just goes for Razor Leaf and Sandile faints. I probably should have tried to knock it out. Anyway, I'm going to take the Blackout. I think it's going to be faster to do things this way rather than battling the rival all over again. I do fight this guy again to get my revenge, this time at full HP, so things are much easier. I continue my training against the Juggler, fighting his 4 Psychic-type Pokemon. This almost brings Sandile up to level 53, which was my target for all of this training. Instead, I just battle a Wild Golbat, which does level me up, and now I'm ready for the Elite Four. Well, almost. First, I'm going to use my rare candies. To this point in the run, I've collected a total of 11. I don't want to use all of them now because I need to save some to manipulate my experience between Elite Four members, just in case I want to preserve badge boosts from Swords Dance. Because of this, I use 7 going up to level 60, saving 4 for later. Okay, now it's time for the Elite Four. As you might expect, Lorelei is going to be really brutal. This is more so the case with Sandile than it is with other ground types. The reason is because the Dugong doesn't like to use Rest on the second turn. I think it's checking the type matchup against my Dark type and seeing that it doesn't do any damage. This means my play with Dig is not nearly as effective as it normally is. Typically what I want to do is go underground, then force the Dugong to use Rest on the second turn. After that, set up with Swords Dance and sweep her team. But in this case, as you can see, the Dugong just continues attacking and knocks Sandile out. Lorelei's AI is weird in yellow version. 2 out of 5 turns, it's going to choose to randomize its move selection. This is to prevent soft locks with Rage against Rest. And so I'm essentially waiting for a turn where it chooses to randomize and then selects Rest. This doesn't happen. I get crit by the Dugong, getting my 3rd reset. Then I make it by it, but I only have +1 and the Cloyster just gets me with Clamp after I miss a Rock Slide. This is another scenario like Koga where I should be using Earthquake because it has the same effective power. I really have internalized that the Rock and Ground type are always paired together, so when you get the same type attack bonus with both of those typings, then Rock Slide is the better choice. But when you're a mono Ground type, it doesn't make sense to use it, except against Flying type Pokemon. At long last, the Dugong selects Rest. This gives me an opportunity to use Swords Dance and set up to +4 before it wakes up. I didn't want to take any damage, so I decided to attack at this level of setup. Dugong goes down, but I wasn't sure about the Cloyster that's next. Unfortunately for me, I haven't figured out that I should be using Earthquake. By the way, in Generation 1, Rock Slide does not have a chance to flinch, it just does damage, so this move is not better even from that perspective. Luckily for me, it doesn't miss, and it has enough damage, and Cloyster faints. From there, I think I can just sweep. Slowbro's next, Earthquake one-shots. The same is true for Jinx, and that leads to Lapras. While it has significantly more health when compared with Cloyster, its defense is about half, so I expect that I'm going to get the one hit. If I don't, I still could win because it could miss with Blizzard or Hydro Pump, but Sandile has enough damage. So it's time for the Hiker, the worst trainer in the entire game. Yes, in most cases he's worse than Surge, but in this case I don't think that's true. If the Machamp uses Submission, it could potentially knock Sandile out. Now, the chances of it using Submission are very low. It's probably just going to spam Leer, or maybe use Karate Chop or Strength. As an insurance policy, I can set up against his initial Onix all the way to +4 and then sweep his team. This gives me the damage I need to confidently one-shot the Machamp and move on to Agatha. Okay, this one is weird. Her Pokemon are usually very scary. not because they're ghosts, but because they have psychic type moves. Dream Eater on the Haunter and Psychic on the final Gengar. In this case though, the first Gengar is the most fearsome opponent because it has Mega Drain. Sandile won't take any damage from Psychic type moves, so the final Gengar can only damage me with Confuse Ray. The Haunter can only damage me with Lick or Confuse Ray, which leaves her team in a place where it's just not very intimidating. With +2, I am able to sweep her team. I think the only way that I would lose there is if I get hit by Lick and paralyzed early on, then things could fall apart due to the status condition. Before Lance, I'm going to use my stockpile of rare candies, only 3 of them though, saving 1 for the champion. This brings Sandile up to level 65. If you thought Lorelei and her water types were a problem, Lance's Gyarados is so much more of a threat. I want to use Swords Dance once here to ensure that I have the damage range to knock out the remainder of Lance's Pokemon, but I might need more setup even than this. However, the problem is that the Gyarados' Hydro Pump just one-shots Sandile. I tried again, and Hydro Pump is still one-shotting. This is what Lance's Gyarados calls the Gyarados Guarantee. And this guarantee has some flaws. It can miss. I tried using Rock Slide right away against it to hopefully not have to chance the miss, but Rock Slide does not one-shot the Gyarados, so I get hit by Hydro Pump and faint for a 3rd time. What I'm really looking for here is a miss from Hydro Pump. Once that happens and I get set up to +2, then I'll knock it out and move on with the battle. This is often the fastest way to beat Lance, specifically with rock ground types, rock types, and fire types. Really anything that is weak to water type moves. I make sure in the overworld that I'm randomizing my motion before the battle to ensure that my RNG seed progresses and I'm not constantly rolling the exact same seed over and over again, getting hit by the Gyarados. I'm also starting to reset much faster because I know if I get hit by Hydro Pump, I might as well not spend extra time watching the HP bar deplete. After my 15th reset of the run, finally Hydro Pump misses and Rock Slide doesn't, so Gyarados goes down. I wasn't really thinking ahead to the rest of the battle, so I decided to go for Earthquake on the Dragonair. The first one has Thunder Wave, Slam, Thunderbolt, and Hyper Beam. Pretty bad set against ground types, so I could have potentially snuck in 1 more Swords Dance here before sweeping his team. Without doing that, I have to rely on +2. I have just enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl, knocking it out with Rock Slide, leading to his final Pokemon, Dragonite. Alright, Rock Slide, please don't miss. This is your moment. It doesn't, hitting, and Dragonite does not go down. It survives on red health. However, Lance replaces Blizzard, which the Dragonite was going to use, with a Hyper Potion. Because of that, I get to re-roll my damage. And in this case, Rock Slide gets a better damage roll and knocks the Dragonite out. Okay, it's champion time. For this battle, I have taught Rest in the place of Dig. By the way, you might be wondering why I held on to Dig. It's for Lorelei specifically, and then I just don't want to replace it if I don't have to. And Rest really wouldn't have helped against any of the other Elite Four members. Okay, for Sandslash, I wanted to set up Swords Dance once to guarantee the outspeed on the Alakazam, but I forgot to use my rare candy, so I'm going to lose my badge boost before his second Pokemon comes in. I don't want this to be the case for the remainder of the fight, so I'm going to use Earthquake now and hopefully finish his first Pokemon. But it just barely survives, luckily choosing Fury Swipes 2 times in a row. So I finish it, move on to the Alakazam, and I thought Sandile was going to have 155 speed for this, but it has exactly 156, tying the Alakazam. Still, it loses the speed tie, but Alakazam just uses Psybeam, and 1 Earthquake is enough to knock it out. This is where it really makes sense to set up against the Exeggutor because it's going to spam Leech Seed. I can take my time here healing with Rest, and then once Sandile wakes up, I use Rock Slide to knock out the Exeggutor, and then Earthquake is super effective against both the Ninetales and the Magneton. Okay, all that's left is the Vaporeon, and like we saw before, if I get a critical hit, I think I'm going to lose. But if I don't, I should have enough damage. In this case, Earthquake does not get a critical hit, and as a result, I have beat Pokemon Yellow with only a Sandile. It gets a time of 56 minutes and 6 seconds with 15 resets, 1 blackout to level 66 with a game time of 3 hours and 25 minutes. I want all of you to look at these results and let them sink into your brain. Memorize them. No. Tattoo them on your body. By the way, one of my professors in university used to constantly say that every time he was telling us something that would be relevant for the test. And yes, this finish time will be relevant later into the video, believe me. Before we see how my follow-up playthroughs go, let's talk to Madrybread because I want to compare and contrast our 2 approaches to these challenges at this point in the video. So Madrybread, just in case my viewers haven't seen your videos, which would be strange, how do you approach your solo challenges?
in my Pokemon challenge runs, I'm kind of just taking it from a casual perspective. I always say that I'm not a PokeTuber and I'm not a professional Pokemon player, even though I guess part of my profession is playing Pokemon. I'm a casual player who has put a lot of hours into Pokemon. You know, I was like maybe 7 or so years old when the first generation of Pokemon came out in English, and I got it the same week that Generation 1 came out in English, and I've been playing Pokemon basically ever since, so I just really like Pokemon. That said, I don't really watch like professional PvP players. I'm not the best player in the world. I just really, I know how to research on Bulbapedia basically to know how to find new moves, how to find new items, where to find Pokemon, stuff like that. And I just use my casual knowledge that I have in conjunction with the kind of research that everybody basically knows how to do, and I just see if I can beat him. That's why my videos aren't called "Can you beat Pokemon whatever with whatever Pokemon?" I name mine "Can I beat?" because it really is just "Can I beat?" Sometimes when I lose, it's a run that I could win. It's just I didn't figure it out because I'm not the best Pokemon player. My goal is to try and beat the Pokemon champion, or at least, get to the credits or whatever. But if I can't actually beat it, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. I do it because it's fun. I just have a lot of fun making these challenges, and that's why I've done over 200 Pokemon challenges. Apparently, I just passed 200.
Before I move on to complete my own methodology and do my follow-up attempts, I want to mention some of the strengths of Madrybread's approach. Number 1, focusing the attention on "Can I beat the game with X Pokemon?" really takes emphasis away from what the Pokemon is capable of and allows the player to make more mistakes but still put together a compelling story. I often find in my videos when I fail to produce good results with a Pokemon that I feel the video is left lacking something. And so often my own creative work doesn't feel satisfying as a result. Number 2, not doing multiple playthroughs per Pokemon really does improve the ability to complete the game with multiple Pokemon, or in Madrybread's case, to do a bunch of other fun challenges which aren't related to the solo format, like can he beat the game with all of Giovanni's Pokemon, things like that. These are challenges that I've also wanted to do in addition to expanding into Nuzlocke, but I haven't had the availability in my schedule because each one of my solo challenges takes so much time to produce. I think there also is a realistic chance that I will never complete some of these projects, because beating a game like Pokemon Platinum or Black with every species might take me multiple decades. I think the third advantage of this approach is that it is more casual. Each time you play a Pokemon, you can just have fun, complete the game, not have to worry about if you played badly or if the results will not be good or comparable. Then you can move on to the next Pokemon and continue to have fun with the solo challenge format. Part of me has some envy towards this approach. I wish I could do things this way, but for me it's not a choice. After I released Gengar vs. Alakazam ages ago, my destiny was laid out before me. I was set down a path towards multiple playthroughs with every video I produced. The reason was, every week I would look at Gengar vs. Alakazam and see the video performing very well in all terms of YouTube metrics. Upon noticing this, every time I had the thought that I should remove the video from the platform. It didn't accurately represent Alakazam or Gengar and the true potential that both of them have. My solution to this kind of problem has been multiple attempts. I just need to keep trying until I get results that I can be satisfied with. However, in some cases, that ends up not being possible. So that brings us to Sandile's follow-ups. Here's what happened. I honestly thought that these were going to be fairly straightforward because Swords Dance is such a good move in these games, and I was really wrong. Things start out rough because if you want the early game to be as optimized as possible, then I need to beat the rival in the lab, but that is not a straightforward process. Using Leer once and then following it with Rage tends to be the best strategy that I could come up with. However, this is still not guaranteed. I have to get quite lucky to defeat this Eevee. If it goes for Tail Whip and then spams Tackle, Sandile is going to lose. If it just spams Tackle, I'm also going to lose, and it can sometimes still win by spamming a bunch of Tail Whips and then 2 or 3 Tackles at the very end of the battle, just because then Rage won't accumulate very much power throughout the initial stages of the fight. I had so many attempts where I failed this initial battle and just couldn't get by the rival, which really slows down the early game because remember, I'm trying to gain experience for Brock, and the rival's Eevee provides almost 2 levels worth of experience with a medium slow growth rate Pokemon. The first split that I wanted to beat was Brock at 6 minutes and 52 seconds, and I figured the best way to do this was leaving encounters on Route 1 so that I battle some wild Pokemon Pokemon, gaining experience before heading to the forest. Here I battle the first bug catcher for experience, then wild Pokemon to get to level 10 in order to have Bite. I want this move before I face the last at the beginning of the forest, just in case I get hit by Growl. Having a higher base power is nice, and I don't want to get locked into Rage. I am going to backtrack to Viridian City, but before I do that, I fight one last bug catcher, the second guy in the forest with 2 Metapod, and then I battle wild Pokemon, depleting all my PP. The reason I go back to Viridian City is so I can battle the rival on Route 22. This is going to set his team to the Jolteon team, which I figured would be fine because I'm a ground type, and it also gives me more trainer boosted experience in the early game so that Brock will be a little bit faster. Skipping ahead to Pewter City, by the time I've battled all of the bug catchers in Viridian Forest and some more wild Pokemon, when I defeat the junior trainer inside Brock's gym, I level up to level 16 and gain access to Sand Attack. Here's my solution for Brock. Sand Attack once to lower the accuracy of moves like Tackle, then use Leer 3 times on the Geodude, lowering its defense, and finally Bite to knock it out in 3 more turns. I use Sand Attack in the same way against Onix. It has diminishing returns after the first use. If it goes for Bite, I want to be lowering its defense with Leer so that I can use Bite to attack it as soon as possible. So I'm beating Brock at a higher level than I did last time, and I did have to do extra stuff in the early game, so once he's defeated, I do have a small time disadvantage when compared with my first playthrough. I am 50 seconds slower. But overall, I think this is acceptable. Battling Brock at a lower level and winning is going to be inconsistent, and with how inconsistent the early game already is with the first rival battle, I felt that adding some time here was the best thing to do overall. For Route 3, battle the bug catcher instead of the Lass. In Mount Moon, battle the Super Nerd, the first Rocket, the Junior Trainer, the second Rocket, and then the 2 mandatory trainers. Whoa, wait up, I skipped something really important, and I don't think I'm the right person to say what must be said next.
On our way there, I took the Dome Fossil. I knew that if I didn't say what I took, you'd all ask. Actually, now that I think about it, everyone ask anyway. Comments are good for the YouTube algorithm.
Okay, with that out of the way, now let's get nerdy, talking about some damage ranges and the results of all my training in Mount Moon. My Sandile's level 21, and it levels up to 22 for the Sandshrew. This way I have access to Dig, which is a 95.5% chance to one-shot. Essentially, I really hate getting hit by Sand Attack, and this is the lengths I went to get around it. On Route 25, I fight one optional trainer, the guy with Onix, and then I make a choice between mandatory trainers, instead fighting this hiker rather than the junior trainer. Now, I'm not going to fight Misty right away because of my speed stat. Instead, I go to the SSN first. As soon as I arrive, I battle the gentleman by the door with the 2 Growlithe because I know that I need his experience. We're going to skip ahead to the rival. I did the standard 3 things: Rest, Body Slam, and the Rare Candy. By the time I finish this fight, I am 1 minute and 15 seconds ahead of my former pace. That's what happens when I cut out backtracking and resets from Misty. Speaking of her, by this time, I only need a tiny amount of experience to level up to 29. Battling the junior trainer in her gym gives me what I need to get 56 speed and tie the Starmie. For this playthrough, I wanted to save my rare candies, so I go in with the speed tie. I can use Dig to one-shot the Staryu, and I have a 32.7% chance of one-shotting the Starmie. If she uses the next defend, then I'll only one-shot if I get a critical hit, but I can always two-shot with Dig. In this case, she does use the X defend, which is annoying, but I still take the win with no resets. I'm now 1 minute and 23 seconds ahead. After Surge, I'm 1 minute and 32 seconds ahead of my former pace, so I've gained a little bit more time. From here, things are basically the same as they were last time throughout the mid-game. My goal is to get to level 40 by the time I reach the rival in Sylph. To do this, I fight 2 bikers on Cycling Road, this guy and this guy, of course. Then I fight 7 trainers in Sylph. Of these, 1 is mandatory and 1 unlocks a rare candy, so I basically consider him mandatory as well. And this is where things go south for me. I figured the rival was going to be fine. I could just set up Swords Dance here. The Sand Slash is going to give me 1 or 2 occasionally, and if I'm able to do that, then I should be able to sweep his team. I go to +6 in the first battle, the Ninetales does a little bit of damage, Cloyster comes out, my Earthquake one-shots. Okay, it seems like I'm fine, right? Because Kadabra can't do anything, but Jolteon can. Its double kicks inflict a lot of damage, I miss my Earthquake at the critical moment, and Sandile faints. That's my first reset, and unfortunately I have many more because the Sand Slash can just use Slash twice and knock me out extremely quickly. If it does that, then I'm never going to get my setup, which is pretty frustrating, unless I knock it out and move on to the Ninetales, which is possible. Remember, it's trash. With just +2, I can't one-shot the Sand Slash. That means it's very unlikely that I'm going to one-shot the Cloyster as well. I figured I would continue my setup against the Ninetales, but no, it just uses Ember and gets a critical hit, which knocks Sandile out. It's rare when this thing is giving the rival wins. I once again make it back to the Jolteon, but other than double kick, it also has pin missile, and since it's moving first, it just knocks me out before I even get a chance to attack. Ninetales gets me again. If I arrive at the Jolteon with low health, then it gets me. Sandslash slashes away, and by this point I had realized that if I'm on low health, I'm not going to win this fight, so I start resetting early on into the battle, not chancing things against the Jolteon. The only way I could win against it is if it gets a Generation 1 miss. Finally, the rival does things that are terrible, and I make it by the Ninetales with green health. This basically ensures that I've won. I one-shot the Jolteon, and with 9 resets, I continue into the playthrough. By the way, I still have a better time than my former playthrough. I am now 12 seconds ahead. I think in this case, looking back on this run, it would have been the right call to restart the entire playthrough and just reconfigure my strategy against Rival 5. But I tried to push through and see how Sandile would do in the late stages of the game. Sabrina's free, Koga is kind of free, provided I get by the first Venonat with +2. From there I can one-hit all of his remaining Pokemon at level 45. Blaine ends up being Blaine, he causes 1 reset, and then I beat him. In this playthrough I delayed Erica, so the splits will resynchronize once I defeat Giovanni. Before fighting him I use a total of 9 rare candies to bring Sandile up from 49 to 58. This ensures that I get the outspeed on all of his team members, and after only 1 Swords Dance I'm going to one-hit everything. Now just to cement the fact that the rival with the Jolteon team is not the correct choice for Sandile to face, let's examine this scenario. While the rest of his team is fairly straightforward, much more so than in Sylph, the Jolteon has high base speed so it can crit fairly regularly. Also, Pin Missile is super effective, so that's the only move it's going to use against me. By the time I arrive at his ace, I'm on lowish health, and I know if it hit more times with Pin Missile or got a critical hit, I would have lost. Still though, I am 14 seconds ahead of my former time, so I decided to see this run through. Lorelei is kind of awful, because the Dugong never goes for rest. Yes, that is hyperbole, sometimes it will go for rest, and I'm waiting for one of these scenarios to finally set up and then sweep her team. By the time I finally get through her, I have 16 resets, although I am now 1 minute and 54 seconds ahead of my former time. Yeah, she went really badly last time, so I guess this is a better playthrough. It really doesn't feel that way. This is definitely the worst optimized playthrough I have done in recent times. Right before Lance I used 1 rare candy to go up to level 63. Now, in order to arrive here at this time, or a much better time if I didn't have 16 resets, I have had to cut training. That has a consequence. Lance is very difficult. At this level, Rock Slide has an 85.7% chance to one-hit the Gyarados after 1 Swords Dance. At level 62, this chance only drops to 83%, and at level 60 it has a 79.3% chance. I felt like going to 63 didn't take that much extra training and was just kind of worth it to get the extra 5%, but going below this level starts to make it so that Rock Slide is less and less likely to hit. I wanted as close to 90% chance to one hit because I need to rely on Gyarados missing a Hydro Pump to pull this off. For Sandile, the first realistic chance of surviving a Hydro Pump is at level 67, where Gyarados has a 62.7% chance to knock me out. Leveling all the way to 70 gives me a roughly 70% chance to survive, which is much better than what I'm currently relying on. However, that is 7 additional levels of training, and that costs a lot of time. While we watch this montage, let's talk about consistency versus optimal speed. In order to obtain the lowest possible time with every single Pokemon, at some point you are going to have to take risks. And as you aim closer and closer for the minimum possible time, the number of risks you have to take increases. When I used to play these challenges, my goal was always to have as much consistency as possible. The problem with that is you both sacrifice time to get consistency, and then you can still lose because of things like Gen 1 misses or critical hits. What I've been finding over the last year is that being risky with your strategies ends up producing the better overall average times. Although I will admit, as a Pokatuber, it looks much worse because I have many more resets, implying that the route is somehow unrefined. But I think all of us should challenge this logic. Right now, my thought process is, if the route is optimal and it's going to give me a good overall average time, even if I have some resets, that's okay. Of course, this number of resets is not okay. By the time I defeat Lance, I have a total of 22. Still though, I'm 1 minute and 48 seconds ahead of my former time, so even though this run feels like an absolute disaster, I am going to beat my last time, because The champion is very simple. Set up on the Sandslash once, knock it out, as well as the following Alakazam, then complete my setup on the Executor and sweep his remaining Pokemon. Doing this, I have enough speed to move first against the Jolteon, so in this case it's not going to hit me with Pin Missile. In my second playthrough, Sandile clocks in with a time of 54 minutes and 28 seconds, and 69 centiseconds. Nice. And what's less nice is my resets, 22 in total, 0 blackouts at level 65, with a game time of 3 hours and 11 minutes. This run is 1 minute and 38 seconds faster than my first run, which is not a good improvement. It feels like basically the same time. And you also have to remember in second playthroughs I have turned off encounters in certain locations like Mount Moon, so really this second run was probably slightly worse than my first playthrough. Because of that, I decided to come back and try again. Before we get into the next run, I want to ask a question because I'm always curious if the mistakes I'm making are unique to my own playstyle. Luckily today we have another Poketuber with us, so Madrybread, where did you experience the most problems during your Sandile run?
I probably struggled the most on Lorelei, which I guess is not really that surprising, although Lance was pretty difficult too, until I realized that I could learn Rock Slide. That definitely helped. But no, Lorelei is often one of the hardest fights in first gen battles, or first gen challenges, I find. You know, I'm using a ground type, I'm fighting a bunch of Pokemon that have strong water moves, a lot of them are part water type. You also have just how strong ice is in Gen 1, where if you get frozen, it's just game over. You've got the super accurate Gen 1 Blizzard, which is nightmarish. You've got Lapras, who's pretty tanky. Really, a lot of Lorelei's Pokemon are pretty tanky, so I'd say that one gave me the most problems. Grass Gym wasn't easy, but it also wasn't super hard. Like, you just get a decent amount of levels and you can just one-shot them, since her part poison-type Pokemon aren't fully evolved in Yellow, although Tangela's much harder in Yellow than it is in Red.
Okay, now back to my third playthrough. In the early game, I don't want to battle the rival on Route 22 because I really don't want him to pick Jolteon. We saw what kind of problems that creates in Sylph. This does slightly slow my Brock split because battling wild Pokemon is always less efficient. So I'm now 1 minute and 16 seconds behind my first playthrough. I make one innovation in this playthrough using one rare candy before Misty to go up to level 30. I know that I can chance Lance's Gyarados somewhere between level 60 and 63, so I don't need levels for it. I would prefer to have less resets now. Unfortunately, that doesn't work out for me because the Starmie lowers my speed with Bubble Beam, so I'm still slower than it on the next turn, and as a result, I lose. But only one reset here. Skipping ahead to the rival in Sylph, this one is a lot easier, and I want to mention why. If I can get set up to +4 and one-shot the Cloyster, then I can always complete my setup on the Magneton if I really want to, but I don't actually need to. Instead, I can just knock it out, as well as the Kadabra, and then the Flareon. I take a first attempt victory this time, proving that the Jolteon team is just much more difficult to face. It always feels a little bit strange, because you want to fight the Jolteon team with water types, but with a ground type. In this case, you don't want to fight the Jolteon team, instead preferring to face Flareon. That's one of the reasons I love doing these challenges, is because the obvious choice is not always the correct one. Okay, time to chance things against Lorelei. Remember, I am waiting for the Dugong to use Rest, and it just refuses to go for it a frustrating number of times. I have a total of 14 resets against Lorelei, making my total 15 for this playthrough, and by the time she is defeated, I am still ahead of my first playthrough results, although only by 1 minute and 25 seconds. Thing is, all of this doesn't matter if Lance goes poorly, and he does. I total 22 resets by the time he's defeated. This is the same number as the last playthrough. Of course, the champion is usually straightforward, but here I have some bad luck against the Sandslash. I take one reset and then defeat him, clocking in with a final time of 55 minutes and 20 seconds, with 23 resets, 0 blackouts at level 64, with a game time of 3 hours and 15 minutes. Remember when I said the playthrough time for my first run was going to be important? Yeah, Sandile just refuses to get a better time. The thing is, I know this Pokemon as a first stage can get an exceptional time because it has Swords Dance. If I get slightly better luck against Lorelei and Lance, then my time will be dramatically better. So of course I had to do this for a fourth time. The rival in Sylph gives me one quick reset on the Sandslash, but after that I defeat him. I tried to play this one a little bit safer, going to the power plant and collecting one more rare candy. This gets me to level 60 instead of 58 for Lorelei. It hardly helps getting this extra level. Really, Sandile just needs the Dugong to go for Rest. This time it happens after only 5 resets against the Ice-type specialist, and then I sweep her team. Okay, this is much better than the last run. Although then I crit the Lapras with Earthquake and it knocks Sandile out with Blizzard. This is so frustrating. So I'm once again stuck at Lorelei, having to reset until the dugong uses rest. Luckily it happens very quickly, and after only 2 more resets, I managed to pull through. Okay, but what about Lance? Well, I'm gonna reset many times here. I finally pull things off with a total of 16 resets, and I am now 3 minutes and 8 seconds ahead of my former time. The thing is, there is still a problem: the rival's Sand Slash. If it uses Slash or Earthquake, it's gonna deal massive damage, but it can also go for Poison Sting or Fury swipes. In the latter 2 cases, I essentially just win for free, but in the former 2 cases, I can lose early on. I really wanted to get set up to +2 against the Sand Slash so I can knock it out with 1 Earthquake, taking a total of 3 turns against it. But it's resisting me here, knocking Sandile out multiple times. By the time I finally get set up against it, I have 20 resets, and then I sweep the champion's team. So in my 4th playthrough, I clock in with a time of 54 minutes and 8 seconds with 20 resets with 0 blackouts at level 65. This is a game time of 3 hours and 13 minutes. And this result is only 1 minute and 58 seconds ahead of my first playthrough. It's moments like this where usually my obsession kicks in. Unfortunately, I cannot spend more time than I have already dedicated to this run on Sandile. I guess later I'll just have to stream runs of it and hopefully try to get a better time, but for now, these are going to be its final results. That is another disadvantage with my format when compared with someone like Madrybread. If I have a bad run, even if I try multiple times, sometimes I'm not able to produce good results. I think that this strategy, shooting for a low level finish with Sandile, relying on Swords Dance, is going to give the best time possible. Of course, if we did this at a higher level, it would be more consistent, but I didn't want to go for that because it just seems suboptimal in the end. Looking at the timeline graph of these 4 playthroughs is really interesting. They are consistently inconsistent. My first run had by far the best Brock split, but from there it wasn't as good. Whereas in my final playthrough, I sacrificed some time throughout the Misty and Surge section of the game, but really made it back throughout the mid-game. And that advantage allowed my Lance and Champion split to not be as good as my first, second, or third playthroughs. But still I was able to claw through and just barely get a better time. It's kind of funny because Sandile was able to produce consistent results. This run is roughly going to be 55 minutes every time I do it. And it produced these results in a very inconsistent way, getting many resets throughout the playthroughs. Funnily enough, the closest analog to Sandile is Marowak. I did 8 playthroughs with it, and if we look at the timeline graphs, these 2 are incredibly close together. That said, Marowak had many less resets, so if we look at the game time by trainer, you can see that Sandile finishes the game with a lower game time, meaning that under perfect luck circumstances, Sandile will outperform Marowak. The next closest ground type in the tier list is Sandshrew, but it is so far away from Sandile. Looking at this timeline makes it clear that these 2 are in completely different tiers. And speaking of the tier list, we have a problem when doing backports. Another ground type, Dugtrio, is causing some problems with the time ranges on the right hand side of the screen. I'm going to remind you that I recorded this video after a bunch of the other October videos, so just notice that I will rebalance the tier list now for this ranking, and then I'm going to do it later into the month. If I change the thresholds to be S tier under 40 minutes, A tier under 44 minutes, B tier under 47 minutes, C tier under 52 minutes, D tier under 58 minutes, E tier under 1 hour and 10 minutes, and F tier under 1 hour and 25 minutes, then we get a much nicer normal distribution of all of the Pokemon runs that I've done up until this point. Sandile's results today get it a placement behind Marowak and Gyarados, ahead of Squirtle and Kadabra. At least one of you is going to think, why is Gyarados so bad? In yellow version, it's starts with only Tackle, and it has a slow growth rate. Someone else is going to wonder why is Kadabra so bad, and the reason is it starts with Teleport and Kinesis. It does not get Confusion. Interestingly enough, in this section of the tier list, I feel like we have first stage Pokemon that outperform Sandile, Squirtle, Bellsprout, and Charmander, and then final stage Pokemon that underperform, like Pidgeot, Marowak, Gyarados, Kadabra, Rapidash, Arcanine, and Jolteon. Before I close things out, I want to reflect on the Dark type in Pokemon Yellow. Honestly, it did pretty well, and immunity to Psychic type moves really does help. Sabrina requires no backtracking, and Psywave is her best move, which is just strange and funny. I'm really looking forward to doing more runs with this typing later on in the month. Thank you so much, Madrybread, for being here with me. Everyone go and check out his Sandile video. That's it for this one. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video. Okay, I once again forgot to record voiceover for Oak, so I'm going to do that now. But instead of me talking about exactly how this battle went, because it's usually not that interesting, in most cases just mimic Hypnosis or set up with a move like Sword Stance and then sweep Oak's team. They're pretty bad because they have the default moves the Pokemon would have through level up at whatever levels they were assigned by the game. So instead of that, I'm going to ask Madrybred one more question. Would you be interested in doing another one of these backport runs in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. This was super fun. In all kinds of games, you know. But obviously, Gen 1, it's probably easier to do in. Gen 1 has a lot of mechanics that I think make runs easier to do in general, like the whole crits being based on base speed thing adds a certain level of randomness to fights that I find makes it a lot easier. That and just how abominably bad the AI can be. You know, even with the, quote, good AI where they pick super effective moves, you know, there's infamous things like how most of Lance's team, if you're using like a poison type, if you're weak to psychic, then most of Lance's team will just spam like agility and barrier the whole time, or just how easy it is to get lucky crits and win that way, or how there's several major trainers who will just waste their time constantly giving up on moves that would completely make you faint, and instead using Dire Hit, or illegally using a super potion as the second move in the round, or stuff like that. And I find that makes for both fun runs and funny runs. So being able to backport Pokemon from new games back to Gen 1 is actually really fun. Both because you get to use something you don't normally get to use, and there's a lot of fun in that. And also just in that Gen 1 is a really funny gen because of things like that. So yeah, I would absolutely do more backports.
Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you to Madrybred for having some extra voiced lines here and helping me out. Also, go and check out his video on his channel. Hopefully in the future, we'll do another backport together, because this was really fun.